Have you ever felt it? You know that kind of gut feeling that the year 2030 isn't just another date on the calendar, but some kind of major turning point for all of us? Well, it turns out a lot of people are feeling that way. And according to a whole bunch of analysis, it's not just a hunch. It's actually a convergence of some really powerful forces, all set to peak right around the same time. Let's break down why this specific decade feels so important.
So, why 2030? What's the big deal? Well, the source material we're looking at suggests it's because all these huge forces in our economy, in our technology, and even in our population numbers are all building to a critical point at the same time. And that's creating a kind of pressure on the whole system that we've just never seen before.
And when you look at the list, the sheer scale of it is just mind-blowing. We're talking about massive debt cycles and currency problems hitting right as geopolitical tensions are boiling over. Then, on top of that, you throw in the massive disruption from AI and automation, plus growing pressure on our climate and resources. And underneath it all, you have these two giant ticking clocks. First, what's called the demographic cliff. By 2030, every single baby boomer will be over 65. And second, the fiscal crisis that comes with it, with things like Medicare's hospital fund projected to run dry just a few years later. It is a lot, all happening at once.
Okay, so to even begin to understand where we might be headed, the analysis suggests we have to first look back, a full 100 years actually. A lot of economists and historians are seeing these really eerie parallels between our time and the lead-up to the 1930s. It suggests we might be living through a kind of long-term cycle that just repeats itself.
Now here's a really fascinating, kind of provocative idea from the source material. What if the 2008 financial crisis wasn't just some terrible recession that we eventually got over? What if it was actually our generation's version of the 1929 Great Crash? Now if that's true, it reframes everything. It means the last 15 years haven't really been a recovery. They've been the long, slow, grinding stagnation that always follows a major systemic break, just like the 1930s.
And when you lay it out on a timeline like this, the parallel is, well, it's pretty hard to ignore, isn't it? Just like the 1929 crash was followed by a whole decade of depression and social turmoil, the analysis suggests our 2008 crisis kicked off our own version of that, a period of stagnation, of mounting pressure, all building towards that pivotal point around 2030.
Okay, so this brings us to a really crucial question. Is this whole crisis that's unfolding just an inevitable collapse? A complex system just breaking under its own weight? Or is it something being actively managed, or at the very least exploited, to get to a specific outcome? Is this whole thing happening by default, or is it happening by design?
You've kind of got two schools of thought on this. On one hand, you have the intrinsic collapse theory. That's the idea that these huge, impersonal forces, like demographics and mountains of debt, are just reaching their natural breaking point. But on the other hand, you have the intentional strategy theory. This one argues that powerful, entrenched interests see these cycles coming from a mile away and are actively using them as a window of opportunity to grab even more power. The analysis we're looking at suggests the truth isn't really one or the other, but a mix of both. And this quote from George Carlin just nails that synthesis perfectly. You see, powerful groups don't need to create the 100-year debt cycle or the demographic cliff. Those things are like geological forces. They just happen. But they can see them coming. They can prepare for them. They don't need to all meet in some secret room and hatch a plan. Their interests just naturally line up on how to manage the crisis when it hits. And the sources argue that the outcome of that management, whether it's on purpose or not, is the hollowing out of the middle class.
So how exactly does this hollowing out happen? Well, the analysis points right to the economic response after 2020 as a key part of the playbook. Step 1, massive government relief programs prevented a 1930s-style deflationary collapse, which was absolutely crucial. But Step 2 is the consequence. Enormous amounts of new money were pumped into the system, and that fueled persistent inflation. And this inflation, Step 3, became the tool. It acts like a slow, quiet, relentless tax that just eats away at the savings and purchasing power of the middle class, making them more and more dependent on the very system that's squeezing them.
Now, this is where our whole understanding of the crisis kind of gets flipped on its head. The ultimate threat might not be what we think it is. It might not be about a total chaotic collapse where everything just stops working. No, it might be about something much more controlled and, frankly, a lot sneakier.
For instance, there's this really scary doomsday scenario from a theorist named Bill Gates. It's called the inverted pyramid. He basically argues that when the economic incentives finally break, farms will just stop producing food. The entire foundation of civilization just crumbles, leading to mass starvation. It's a terrifying picture of a totally uncontrolled breakdown.
It's a really compelling theory of scarcity. But is that what's really happening? Is the core of our system, our actual ability to produce the things we need to survive, is that actually in danger of collapsing? Because the data tells a completely different story. In fact, it points in the exact opposite direction.
Yeah, far from collapsing, the systems for producing essential goods are seeing massive investment. I mean, the food robotics market alone is projected to hit nearly $15 billion by 2034. And why is that? The industry reports are pretty clear about it. It's to fill relentless labor gaps and ensure food safety. So, while human labor might be getting squeezed out, automation is rushing in to make sure production absolutely does not stop. The system is being stabilized and made more efficient, not left to collapse.
And that brings us to the most crucial point. The endgame isn't a world of scarcity where there's nothing available. No, it's a world where essential goods are produced more efficiently than ever before, but where the control over that production is centralized in fewer and fewer hands. The real crisis isn't about a lack of stuff. It's about a lack of independence from the system that provides that stuff.
So if the system is being engineered to create dependence, what's the response? How do you push back? Well, the analysis suggests the answer lies in rebuilding the very foundation, the physical and the social footing that makes independence possible in the first place.
And this is where another piece of the puzzle just clicks right into place. All this failing infrastructure, the crumbling roads, the fragile power grids, unreliable communications, it isn't just a sign of neglect. The analysis argues it's actually a kind of strategy. Because when the physical foundation of a society decays, it removes the footing that independent communities need to organize, to create their own local supply chains, and to resist centralized control. People just become too busy with basic survival to challenge the bigger system.
And what's the end result of all this? You get a system that functions as what you could call a de facto oligarchy. I mean, on the surface, it still looks like a republic, right? We still vote, we still have all the institutions, but in reality, a very small class controls all the essential resources: the money, the food, the energy. With the middle class hollowed out and the infrastructure decaying, the now dependent population doesn't have an independent power base left to offer any real resistance.
So what's the rational response that's outlined in the source material? Well, if the big macro system is being built for dependence, then the only logical path forward is to start building independence at the small local level. This means doing things like mapping out the skills and resources that already exist right there in your community. It means encouraging local production and creating mutual aid networks that don't have to rely on that fragile centralized infrastructure. And it means building independent communication networks, using tech like LoRa, which is just a low-power, long-range wireless system that can't be easily shut down from the outside. And all of this leaves us with the final and maybe the most important question. In a world where so many forces seem to be pushing us all towards systemic dependence, what does real, tangible independence actually look like? For you, for your family, and for your community. The patterns are becoming clearer, the choices are becoming starker, and the time to start thinking about them is right now.